Welcome to For F1's Sake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula 1 fans chatting absolute nonsense and offering our ridiculously biased opinions. We've been in Austria this week, and it was, it's a full weekend because we've had the sprint weekend this weekend. So, I mean, thoughts, Brad, initial thoughts?
Well, there's always been these arguments on whether or not we actually like the sprint format. And again, it's another one where I've gone, do we like it or not? I think the actual sprint race was really interesting. It offered completely different positioning to what we used to, especially for the Haas cars. I mean, that was kind of an unbelievable performance for them. So, yeah,
they've had a great weekend.
They have. The whole weekend's
really
been incredible for them. But yeah, I wasn't sure if I liked the sprint race as much as I thought I would. I'm still not convinced.
I've got to be honest. I thought the sprint itself was a little bit off. Not that it was bad, and I just think there was something. There's something missing.
Yeah,
in that
that's how I
race,
feel as well. I feel about
made me feel a bit funny.
That's the way I feel about most of the sprint races, though. I always go, there's something a little bit weird about it. I don't know if it's because it's just not a full duration, or what it is.
I know what you mean. I mean, I had a question posed for you, which I may as well ask now since we're on the topic. Do you feel like the sprint format, having a smaller race, dilutes the main race? I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past, but for me, looking at that sprint race, it's because it changes the Grand Prix starting order. Qualifying has less of an appeal because it's a qualifying for a 23 lap race, which is a tiny race. And because they've already raced, the racing order they finish in would typically then put cars in race pace order. So when we have a qualifying session, because some cars are stronger in qualifying and some cars are stronger on race pace. And so do you feel like having that racing format to decide the qualifying, or I shouldn't say the qualifying, to find the race order, starting order for the Grand Prix, then dilutes the racing because of the fact that they are in kind of pace order for the race?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that almost 100%. I think it makes no sense because, once you've got your fastest drivers at the front, that's kind of the race done. Whereas if it's in qualifying and someone makes a mistake or they end up like 8th, like Russell did a couple of races ago because of a mistake, that changes the race. That means that you get to see more from that driver and you get to see how good they are at recovering from that mistake rather than them just leading the pack the whole race. But what makes me disagree a little bit was, why didn't Leclerc actually get up to the side of Verstappen like he has done during the race 3 times today?
Great point. Yeah, Max just seemed to disappear off into the distance in the sprint race.
Yeah,
but yeah, today
completely
it was
different.
A complete flip side, which is bizarre. I mean, what would be so different in the Grand Prix today from the sprint race? It just seems nonsensical.
Max was moaning quite a lot, wasn't he, about his car at different points where he said he didn't have grip one lap and he had grip the next lap. So it was always a little bit of a mixed bag for him. But obviously, other than Sainz, we heard no complaints really from the Ferraris until the very, very end where Leclerc had like an issue with his pedals. But I think that's the difference. When Max starts complaining, usually there is something wrong, and that's when his lap times start to disappear. And it didn't seem like he was happy with the car today. So maybe that was the difference.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, it may just be the case that we've had 2 races. I mean, qualifying isn't as taxing on the cars as a 23-lap sprint race, and so maybe that has started to take an effect. Maybe we're seeing more of I was going to say more of a reliable Ferrari, but based on what we saw today, that's not the case.
Yeah, neither of those cars are really that reliable. That's the interesting thing. We'll get back into that as well. But with the sprint, I thought the main point was the fact that Mercedes were looking so quick in the qualifying sessions. Obviously, they had the issues with the 2 crashes in the end causing the red flags, but they had no pace against the Haas cars at all, especially Lewis. He had nothing against them. He just couldn't overtake. And I didn't quite understand how the Haas cars had suddenly become so much faster.
It seems like the Haas cars have got the top end speed. They seem to be really good on the straights. I mean, that may be a benefit when we go to Monza. We may see the Haas's doing really well. But I mean, they've, like we said before, they've had a great weekend and they've really benefited in that sprint race. I mean, it was unfortunate that Mick got overtaken by Hamilton at the end because he just kind of he got left for dust, didn't he? I mean, from Magnussen was kind of dragging him round with the
Yeah,
DRS, and that was helping him to defend against Hamilton. And then for one reason or another, Magnussen decided, nah, sod you, I'm fucking off up the road, and that really buggered
yeah, it left
Schumacher. He
him
couldn't
in
defend
a
at that
it was
point.
a horrible position for him to be in, especially with a 7-time world champion behind you. But
Yeah,
what was interesting is Mick had a few arguments over the radio with the team saying that he was faster than K Mag, and they weren't sure why they weren't letting him through. But again, that's their
yeah.
front driver probably is K Mag because Mick has only just got this run of confidence now, so it's kind of a debate for them whether or not they're going to let Mick through the younger driver who is more likely to make a mistake. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was adamant, wasn't he, on the radio that he was faster than Magnussen, and so he kind of got the opportunity today to kind of show that he
yeah,
was, and he did really well. I mean, we've been critical of Schumacher recently for obvious reason because of the fact that he hasn't put in the performance we would expect of him. But he the past couple of races, I've got to be fair to him. You know, he's shown a little bit more of what he's about, and I'm quite impressed with. I mean, he's still not for me. I mean, I know that he's been performing well, and he seemed to be quicker. He definitely seemed to be quicker than Magnussen
yeah,
this weekend. But he doesn't, as a whole. You know, Magnussen is still there. He's not outperforming Magnussen. He's not a much better driver. And if you think about where Magnussen stands in you know where he stands in terms of the grid, in terms of outright speed, he's not. You know, he's not in the upper echelon of drivers, is he?
no.
He's still in, you know, mid tier to bottom mid tier driver. So, you know, it makes you think, well, what is Schumacher offering there? You know, I know he's a huge marketing player. I know he's huge in the sport because of his name, but I want to see him push a bit further. I think that's what I'm trying
Yeah, I
to say
mean,
is
the confidence is
I want to
there,
see him.
right? I mean, he's got a good chance of keeping that run going. He's got a great mentor now with Seb. Obviously, loves the fact he's getting points in and everything like that. But what I don't understand for Haas is how these cars are so inconsistent because they go from one race where they've got a fifth and sixth or something on the qualifying speed, which is incredible. But then they'll end up at the back of the
Yeah,
pack because they're just not fast enough to keep up with the other cars. But then this race, it's a Ferrari engine, and it showed that. It is an
yeah,
unbelievable race for them. They kept battling in the midfield with Alonso, Ocon, Hamilton at one point, which is kind of what you want from that team. They're trying to prove they're meant to be at the top of the midfield, but you can't be that team unless you're being consistent with it. And I guess that comes down to strategy, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. Well, speaking of strategy, one team that got it absolutely nailed for the race, at least, was Ferrari.
Mm,
Finally, Ferrari's strategists have made a good call because typically, week in, week out, they are the weakest link of the Ferrari team. But they had a brilliant race. Sprint race was a bit of a nothing race for Ferrari, unfortunately. I mean, they weren't completely outgunned. You know, if you look at the finishing order, Leclerc only finished 1.6 seconds behind Verstappen, so he wasn't far off at the end of the race. But then again, it's only 23 laps, and so how far back could you be? But yeah, I think Ferrari on race pace did really well today, and I'm glad to see Leclerc winning a race, and not only winning a race, but winning a race from not being on pole.
yeah, I mean, that's the first time he's ever done that, which I didn't realize. I mean, that's an incredible thing that he only wins races when he's in pole, but he's broken that
Yeah,
record now, which is great for him. And it was quite an impressive drive from him as well. And until we had those issues at the end where you get a little bit nervous, he did look like the fastest driver on track today. So, yeah, a deserved win. And obviously for Sainz, a massive disappointment, but the Ferraris did have the right calls. They didn't
yeah,
battle each other at all, which is actually something they did during the sprint race, didn't they? They battled for a little bit, which lets Max just run away with it. You can't do that.
yeah. Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's trying to understand, where the battle is, and that's something that Sainz said on the radio. I remember when he was battling with Leclerc, he said, "I thought the fight was up the road, not between us two."
Yeah.
And so it should be, I think in a situation where you've got a sprint race where you've not got an amount of time to eke a decision out, you don't have the time to say, right, okay, well, you can fight for a few laps, and then once you've decided who's fastest, go up the road. I think it has to be a case of, whoever's quicker, instantly, you need to switch round. and we need to go and chase after Verstappen. The fastest driver needs to go and chase after Verstappen because otherwise, he did what he did in the sprint race and he just kind of waltzes up the field without too much effort. It's a bit of a strange weekend for Verstappen. Like we said before, he did so well in the sprint race, and he just had a bit of. It was almost like he gave up pretty much straight away in this race. As soon as he got passed by Leclerc the first time, for me at least, it kind of felt like he was like, right, okay, well, if he's passed me, then clearly there's something wrong with my car, and so I'm just going to be resigned to second or third.
Well, it's the first time this year that Verstappen's let someone pass and let it stick. That's another stat that I didn't know. So really interesting to see how well he defends against people as well. But today he didn't have that. I don't know if he was just conceding the spaces because they didn't have the machinery today or what it was. But yeah, people like Charles just get past on that occasion, and you have to be perfect to get past Max usually, which was different today.
Yeah, I mean, Christian said something on the radio about wanting to investigate the deg in the middle of the sprint. And so for anybody that isn't familiar, degradation is essentially how quickly the tyres degrade over the course of the race. And so teams will often, look at how much degradation they're using on a particular tyre, and that's how they quantify what their strategies are going to be for the next race. And so Christian was saying that, essentially hinting at the fact that the degradation had been too high for the middle of the race. But I don't see why that would have been the case, because he wasn't fighting, was he? He wasn't battling. He was kind of going around at his own pace, and if he was slower, he was slower. If he was quicker, he was quicker. He didn't seem to be like, it didn't seem to me like he was trying to take too much life out of the tyres. So I wonder whether there's maybe some inherent understeer in that Red Bull that's maybe scrubbing the tyres a bit more, or maybe the opposite, but inherent oversteer. There's something there that doesn't seem to add up for me.
It's got to be one of those things. It has to be something to do with the degradation for Max's race entirely, because I think it was only about maybe 15 laps in when he started moaning that his degradation was too much to handle, whereas you didn't hear that from either of the Ferraris until like 10 laps later. So it's not looking good for them on that point. But with Formula 2, I don't know if you watched any of that, but the degradation was like unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. There was marbles over the entire track everywhere. It was just ridiculous. Like undrivable at one point. It was just so much. If you weren't on the racing line, you were basically you were going off. It's dangerous. But weird one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking about going off, I mean, how many drivers were exceeding track limits today?
Yeah, that's definitely one of my points today. I mean, the black and white flags and penalties, I've never seen anything like that either.
I've never seen that many penalties given out for that, and I've got to be honest, I think it's a bit harsh, because that track is the gradients are so severe. If you look at the steepness of turns 2 to 3, the top of turn 3 is at the top of the hill essentially, and so there's a huge gradient up there. And so for drivers that are sat that low down in the car, they've also got these deflectors over the front wheels. How are they supposed to see?
Yeah, they can't see it.
Exactly, where they can't, can they? And so I think that was a bit harsh. I mean, I understand they have plenty of warning. I think they get, was it 3? Oh, no, it's 2 track limits warnings, and then you get the black and white flag, which is your official warning, and then it's a penalty. I think we saw 5-second penalty, which was what was being given out up and down the grid. And so I think it was about 5 or 6 drivers that ended up with a 5-second penalty.
I don't even know what the ending order actually is because of the penalty. I don't know if people were shifted around, if they were close together, but I mean, that midfield for most of the race were right next to each other. So,
Yeah, well, I think it was, I don't think there's been any particularly large shifts in terms of penalties. I think that most of them were served in the pit stops.
Yeah.
And so none of them were kind of given retrospectively. So I think the finishing order was pretty much as it was. I mean, that was something that I saw with McLaren. So I was keeping a keen eye on where McLaren were throughout the race. And so it seemed to me that they were, 1 minute they were at the bottom of the grid, next they're upper midfield, and they're back at the bottom again. And so they were taking the pit stops, but then obviously having to serve these stop-go penalties. It was just so frustrating because you don't know where they were going to end up.
It's hard to watch, isn't it, sometimes? Because you don't know where everyone's going to come out. And I think we saw Baby Stroll was up in like 4th at one point. I mean, he just didn't pit for so long. Yeah. How did he end up in 4th? And then suddenly at the end of the race, he's like 16th again, where he belongs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He when he was the last person to pit, wasn't it? He was the
yeah, he
very
was the
last
last person.
driver to
But
come
the
in.
penalties are weird, aren't they?
Um,
Because, well, I'm glad in a way they're kind of consistent. I played the new game in the last week when it came out, and it's exactly the same on the game. You can't see it even in that. So
yeah,
it's weird how close the boundary is on that because the curbs are pretty wide, but that is the racing line. So I don't know.
it's a funny one, isn't it? It's where do you? There has to be some common sense for me as to if it's a millimeter over the line. I don't understand. It's a bit like the VAR situation in football, isn't it, with the offside rule? There has to be some form of discretion there because we are human at the end of the day, and they're judging it essentially off their front wheel because of the fact that their rear wheel extends slightly further out because it's slightly wider, and so they can get a reasonable guess. But it's similar to how Martin was saying. When they're in that corner, they're not looking at that corner. They're looking at the next corner at the end of the straight. So most of these track limit violations are coming up the last corner, turn 10, and at that point they're looking at turn 1, which is at the end of the pit straight. And so they have to make that decision in a way subconsciously. They're subconsciously placing the car because it's being placed from a decision made half a
Yeah.
second ago.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's very difficult, especially now they can't see it. There's mud guards in their way as well. There's just so much in the way of that tiny, tiny line. It's a little bit harsh, but at the same time, they also get free warnings before they're told that they get the penalty. So
They do. Yeah, they get
that
a
is
lot
the
of
discretion, isn't it? And it doesn't happen that often.
I suppose, yeah, I suppose you're right. But interestingly, how strange that nobody seemed to pick those penalties up in the sprint race.
There were still a few.
It was like a completely different
There's
weekend.
a few warnings. I remember there being a couple, but it was nowhere near as many as during that race. It was just constant. Every single lap you had it coming up. And Lewis was arguing quite a lot. He's the only one we really heard. I'm sure everyone else was arguing as well. But he was really unhappy the fact that he thought that he was in.
Because he instantly thinks, I think with Lewis, it's a case of he thinks he's been singled out. I think when that comes on the radio, it's a case of I'm being singled out. Why am I being the one? And then when eventually he got told that it wasn't just him, there's at least 6 other drivers on the grid that have even been given a stage further than you, Lewis.
Yeah.
I think he then is like, all right, okay, maybe. I mean, the thing is though, if all the drivers are doing it, then there's a solution. The problem doesn't seem to lie with the drivers. It maybe potentially it's something to do with the track or the way that the regulations are set out.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's the track because it has to be because it doesn't happen in any of the tracks. I think it's just the way the track is laid out that it happens quite often. Because a lot of coming out of the corners, a lot of the curbs are the very edge of the track, which is where they want to be for optimum speed, which is important on that track as well because it's so fast. But it's a great track. It's actually one of my favorites to watch because there's just so much going on. And a lot of the overtakes are pretty pure. They're not like DRS overtakes.
Yeah. I think all of that is aided by the fact that it's a small circuit. It's the shortest, I think, on the calendar, or it's the shortest lap time at least, anyway. And so you've got shorter DRS, something that we've mentioned before. So it means that the DRS isn't as powerful. You're having to fight more for your positions, but you're able to defend. I mean, we saw some terrible defending. It seems to be predominantly on turn 4, the infamous turn 4 where we saw Albon and Lewis collide.
Yeah.
And we've seen many collisions this weekend. I mean, who was it in the sprint race? It was Hamilton and Gasly. Was it Hamilton? No, that was at the beginning of the race. That was just off the start line at the sprint race, and that was
on the new.
It was Russell
well.
and yeah. Turn 4 just seemed it just seems messy. You just can't go up the inside on turn. Around the outside on turn 4 because. I don't know. I mean, for me today, it wasn't Hamilton. It was Russell, like you said, Russell and Perez. And so in that incident, for me, watching it back, I felt that Russell had full lock on at that point. He'd hit the apex on the inside of the line and he had full lock on. And so I don't see what more, like he said, I don't see what more George could have done at that point. I feel like Perez could have given him a bit more room on the inside, but at the same time, conversely, Perez was ahead at that corner. I mean, what's your take on it?
I mean, he was ahead, but at the same time, I think no one really takes into perspective how much space Perez had compared to Russell. I mean, Russell is squeezed to the very, very curb. Like, there's no room for him.
Yeah.
And like you said, he was pretty much, if not fully, full lock. And Perez has the whole side of that track to work with. No one's trying to overtake him because you're not going 3 abreast into that.
Yeah.
So why does no one look at that? I don't get why Russell gets a 5-second penalty for something he really couldn't avoid. Glad they're consistent
I
in the
think
way, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's down to consistency with the penalties. I think they've shown that in previous years. If you go around up the inside and you knock somebody on the outside, you're the one end up getting the penalty to and that's good because in a way it helps promote people going around the outside, other than getting to a corner and just having it be one of those corners that nobody tries to overtake at. But I did think it was a bit harsh. I feel like it was more of a racing incident. I'm sure they've deemed that to be the case in previous examples of cars coming together on turn 4. I just feel like there was too much evidence both ways for it to be a definitive, that's George's fault, 100% 5-second penalty. But at the end of the day, it didn't really make too much of an effect against George's result. I mean, Mercedes this weekend have had, as I say this weekend, I say for the race, the Grand Prix, fantastic weekend. I don't think they could have done much, but they couldn't have done much better. They were aided by the fact that Sainz's engine blew up.
Yeah, they were aided by it. But it was a great weekend for them, other than the qualifying session where they caused the red flags. They could have been a little bit further up. Obviously, Lewis definitely could have, but they finished exactly where you kind of expected them to in the end, other than Sainz going off, like you said. But yeah, they keep eking out these results, and it's bringing them closer and closer to having the constructor, because they keep getting the same results. That's 3 podiums in a row for Lewis. They capitalise on the other cars not being reliable, or nothing much Perez could have done in that race to avoid that damage that he ended up having, because a lot of carbon came off the car. It just didn't seem to work after that. But
yeah. I mean, like you said, with the constructors, Mercedes now are 70 points behind Ferrari in the constructors, with Red Bull obviously further up the road. Ferrari another 56 points ahead of Red Bull another 56 points ahead of Ferrari. But I mean, that shows, considering Mercedes haven't had a win this season. You look at Red Bull's 7 wins to Ferrari's 4, yet Mercedes are right on their tail.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It just shows consistency is the main thing. Consistency is always going to be the overriding factor in Formula One. You can win a race every 10 races, and you can come second or third in all races, and who's going to come out with more points? The guy that comes second or third. Proven by Mercedes. And so I think that's a great weekend for Hamilton getting a podium. I can't imagine he was expecting that. Even after having a penalty, I think is.
Yeah, I didn't expect.
Did he have a penalty?
No,
actually,
I don't think he ended up with one in the end. I'm pretty sure the third warning came, and then that was it for him. But yeah, he raced pretty clean, and I wasn't expecting it at all, because he kept getting stuck behind the Haas cars, and he wasn't able to battle them with the pace because he just didn't have the straight line. But somehow still ends up in third, and I guess the strategy must have been perfect as well for them. There was no complaints. Slow pit stops as well, which could have caused more problems for them.
Yeah. The Haas just seemed to outrun the Mercedes, at least on the straights. I just think they're aided Mercedes by the fact they got Hamilton and Russell behind the wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, I was surprised that Russell managed to get ahead of Ocon at the back half of that race. I didn't think he was going to do that, because Ocon's looked pretty strong all weekend. The Alpines have looked pretty strong all weekend. It's just a shame that Alonso couldn't do much this weekend with the issues that he had at the beginning of the sprint race on Saturday. Kind of put him to the back of the grid today, and it just ended up ruining his weekend, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 drivers that I want to kind of highlight a little bit in this race, was actually Ocon and Gasly. So with Ocon, I thought his entire weekend was amazing, and he showed that he had so much pace during the race today that he just kept getting those clean overtakes. No problems where he was battling with like 5 cars at one point. He just kept it calm and carried on, which is what you want from Ocon. We haven't seen that so often, where he's actually been consistently good at keeping his car in front. So yeah, I'm glad that he did that. But then with Gasly, I think you'll agree with this as well. The last week for him has been horrendous. He causes
Yeah.
accidents everywhere. I don't know if he's got like his brain's left the angle somewhere else, but he's just straight away off the line causes an accident with Vettel, gives him a bit of damage. That was pretty poor. And then I think later on in the race with Sonoda, he also causes another driver to go off the track because he just didn't give any space. He probably got a penalty for that. I don't remember if he did or not. And
And he had the incident with Hamilton as
with
well
Hamilton,
in the sprint
yeah. And
race,
then last week
and
with
that was
Joe.
that incident with Hamilton as well at the beginning of the sprint race was so similar to the incident at Silverstone in terms of the way that the car hit the back wheel and started to bounce. I thought, as soon as I saw that, I thought
It's
he's
gonna be the
going
same
over,
thing.
and luckily it managed to come back down before it had launched too far in the air. But we could have had a repeat of Silverstone within a week, which is
But
mental.
that's four things that I can think of during this one weekend, and then a couple last weekend as well, where he's just been very naive and he's not let people through. He's cutting off angles that he should never cut off. So I don't know what's going on with Kazzy. That's not really a common thing for him. He's usually pretty good.
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's difficult to drill down on exactly what that could be. He's not he's not a driver that's been struggling at the back of the field. You look at somebody like Vettel that has been struggling recently, and so I can't see anything going on mentally. He's got this contract for next year. I wonder whether he's just comfortable. He's too comfortable, and he's lost that sharpness. Maybe he just. I know what you mean. We were hearing a lot about Gasly this weekend, but for all the wrong reasons. So I don't know. I don't know what could be causing that.
Yeah.
Potentially he's just fed up in that AlphaTauri because the AlphaTauris as a whole aren't doing particularly well recently.
I would be fed up
They
as well. When you're
aren't
in a
performing.
sister team, I would hate to be a driver for AlphaTauri, honestly, because you know you're never going to beat the main team. It's just maybe once in a blue moon you'll get a lucky race where they go out and you somehow manage to win it because it's raining or something. And I think we have seen Gasly
Yeah,
do that, actually, funnily enough. But
yeah,
yeah, it's a team that you'd never want to be in because you know you're never going to beat them. So why is he still there? I mean, he wasn't good enough when he had the opportunity, and now he does seem pretty fed up. But he signed on for longer.
yeah. Well, we said this, didn't we? It seemed like it wasn't actually a contract extension. It was more of it was already signed initially, and it was just for some reason announced. Yeah, it's a funny one. It's a weird team, isn't it? It's a weird team to be in because they always seem to come at the beginning of the season. They always seem to come and look like they're going to be one of the top of the midfield, potentially bridging that gap between third and the rest of the midfield. But they never seem to cash in on those promises. They seem to dwindle throughout the course of the season. We get flashes of brilliance from them, but it's so sporadic. It's never, like we said, it's never consistent. And so it's very difficult being in that team for a long period of time because you then I imagine you will become a bit more complacent. You will
Yeah,
sit
definitely.
yourselves down in P12, 14, whatever it might be, and just think, well, that's my job slot. I can't do any more than that, so I may as well just stay here. You don't fight as
How
much,
much?
I
I think.
suppose.
Well, I don't know if you know the answer, but how much of a sister team actually is AlphaTauri to Red Bull? Because you'd think if they've got the same knowledge that the main team has and the same facility and everything like that, I don't know what they've got different. You'd think they'd be able to challenge the front three if they had the same car.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how much AlphaTauri do themselves, because you look at Haas and Ferrari, and Haas will buy as much components from Ferrari as they possibly can do. And again, for anybody that's not aware, teams can purchase components from manufacturers like Mercedes, Ferrari, Alpine to use on their cars. But there's a mandate as to how many you can have and what you can have. So all the aerodynamic services on the car have to be designed by the teams. And so Haas, in their circumstance, they will use as much parts as they can legally get away with from Ferrari, because it saves them cost having to develop them, and they can focus solely on the aerodynamics. But AlphaTauri, as far as I'm concerned, they take some components from the Red Bull, but the majority of, well, obviously all the aerodynamic services are their own, but I think a lot of the suspension work and things like that are still designed in-house at AlphaTauri.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I'm certain that that's the case. And so they are more of their own team than a sister team compared to other teams that are on the grid. Because it used to be a case that AlphaTauri literally just took last year's Red Bull.
Yeah.
But obviously, because we've had these new regulations,
Well,
they can't do anything
previously,
like that.
they were basically known as Red Bull Toro Rosso. It was not just Toro Rosso. And now it's
I mean, what does Toro Rosso mean in Spanish? It's Red
literally,
Bull.
but now they've changed the name to AlphaTauri, and it's kind of a completely different way of looking at it, which I'm guessing is to do with that as well, to try and make it their own sort of thing. But it's just
Yeah,
not
well,
Red Bull, is it?
they're based as well.
Um,
No, and
yeah.
they're based in Italy as well. So
Yeah.
they're a far cry from Milton Keynes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not actually really a Red Bull. It's more just the ownership from the team and a bit of sponsor. But
Yeah,
there's still a big bull on the side. So you'd think it'd be faster.
That may change though. It may change next year. They may go, right, let's just take last year's Red Bull.
Why not? We've seen that happen before with the pink Mercedes. Just do it.
Yeah, we've had the pink Mercedes, and then we've had the green Red Bull
this year. Yeah, but which
this
as
year
it works, I don't know. Not really. Maybe a couple results, but
yeah, he's having a torrid time, isn't he? Vettel.
I feel sorry for
Vettel
him.
Especially. He spun off again today, lap 40.
Yeah, what caused that? I can't remember if it was his own. Was it his own mistake?
I think again it was. It's Gasly, wasn't it?
So it was Gasly. So what caused Tsunoda to go off then? Because he also went off at one point.
I don't recall the Tsunoda incident.
I feel like it was Tsunoda. I might be losing my mind.
I remember there was something that made me laugh with Tsunoda actually, because he had a bit of a padding with Alonso, and then Alonso comes past and starts wagging his finger in the braking zone.
The presence of mind for someone to do that when you're coming into a corner at that speed after a DRS zone, to get past and also wag your finger at someone to say like you've done a wrong here. Mental.
Yeah, I mean that just shows experience, doesn't it? Alonso is just a different level. It's different gravy. But that made me laugh. I thought that was really funny. I'm really pleased with McLaren's results. I know we mentioned them before. They're going up and down, up and down. And I thought, as soon as I saw Norris having to take that 5-second penalty, I thought,
could be done.
We're in for another crap weekend. But they brought it back, and they finished. Where did they finish? They finished Alonso. My mind's going nuts today. Ricciardo 9th and Norris in 7th, and so decent result. I mean, I'd like to have seen them score better against the Haas, because they should be outperforming the Haas at this stage of the season. But I think I'm happy with that performance after previous weekends where we've had pretty much nothing to say. I mean, for Daniel Ricciardo getting the points, that's a massive thing. He obviously listened to last week's podcast.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, he does listen every week, so. Yeah, I mean, Alex really taught him a lesson, especially with the accent last week. I think he put him in place. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good weekend for McLaren in the end. But I thought what was really interesting during the race was that you see Lando was really pushing to overtake during that five-man battle.
Brilliant! But I love that. We're seeing more and more of it as well.
We are seeing more of it, and they're great overtakes as well. Because, like we said, it's shorter track, so it's not so much DRS assisted. You have to make a good move at the end of that DRS zone,
and lots of corners with
great
good
corners
entry
well.
points to make overtakes.
But saying that, although Lando was amazing at doing it, where's Ricciardo with the overtakes? I don't think I saw a single one. Obviously, we only get to see what we're allowed to see, but I didn't hear anything about his overtakes.
I mean, he must have made some.
To have, but where were they? We didn't get to see it. Like that kind of, the media are almost putting him in the dark. Like, give us a little bit of Ricciardo so we can see that he's trying to improve. Because right now, great result, but it's still 9th.
I mean, yeah, because he's known as the last of the late breakers, isn't he? He's supposed to be the last one on the brakes at every opportunity, but he's not lived up to that recently. But I mean, he must have made some overtakes today. He's just had a quiet race. This is the problem, isn't it? When I know it's been mentioned by other Formula One outlets this season about the TV direction. It's choice at best.
Yeah. Well, unless you've got Sky Glass, and then you can press the red button and you can watch every part of the race.
To be fair, I think actually you can do it on your iPad.
Really?
You can watch. Yeah, I think they've got an option on the iPad where you can. It's like I think they call it race control, and so you can choose who you want to follow throughout the race. Maybe we should really be doing that, because we're professional podcasters at this point, and so
absolutely.
But that's another level that we need to be taking.
I mean, you said that, and I actually looked through a few different channels for the Formula One. So we've got an IPTV as well, so you can watch it very illegally. But we can flick through the channels.
You can't say that. You can't say that.
Well, they're never going to catch me. They haven't caught me for the last 4 years, Tom. So I don't think they're going to get me now. But yeah,
Well, they know where your Twitter handle is because we mentioned it at the end of the episode.
well, I'm watching a channel from like Hong Kong TV or something crazy where they've got the permission to stream the race. And for whatever reason, they've got an onboard camera from Hamilton's car for the entire race. I don't know where they
Oh,
get
don't tell me you've been
permission
watching
for it.
Hamilton for the
No, I
entire
didn't. I
race.
watched the Sky. Obviously, I watched Sky, but I think it's really interesting that a channel can like have purely just the onboard. There's nothing else. There's no audio, no commentary. It is just Hamilton's onboard.
Yeah,
Where do
that
they
is
get that
weird.
from? Like, where they actually
Yeah, it's
asked the
odd.
team for permissions to stream Hamilton's onboard for an entire race.
Yeah, because I always thought that there was the global F1 TV direction, wasn't there? It's like F1 film it all and then broadcast it to each individual broadcaster for them to overlay their graphics and overlay their commentary. And so everybody sees the same thing. So everybody on the pit wall is seeing the same graphics as what we're seeing. Obviously, we've just got Martin Brundle and David Croft that's commenting on it for us in the UK, at least, anyway. Interested, actually. I'd be interested to know what it's like in other countries. I know that there's a lot of people around the world that listen to us each week, and so I'd be interested if you leave us a comment on Twitter, maybe some clips to
Yes, I need a
what
Spanish
Formula One
clip.
is like.
I want a Spanish one because you know what they're like during the
Spanish
football
clip.
when a goal goes in, they go wild. So imagine an
Yeah.
overtake when a big tense moment. Oh, that's got to be a clip
Yeah,
we need to
definitely. But even like the American, I mean, we have loads of a huge American audience, and so let us know. Send us a clip on Twitter. We'd love to see what it's like from your guys' perspective, because we have an embarrassment of riches within Formula One in the UK at least. Martin Brundle and David Cross have been doing this for years and years and years, and we used to have Murray Walker, obviously, who's a legend in the sport. But they're so informative and so on it every week. I think they're brilliant. But really interested to know what it would be like around the world. So please do send us your clips because we'd love to see them. So moving on, I just thought in general today there was loads of overtaking. It was a fairly action-packed race, and like we said, I think that's down to the fact that the track is shorter. I think we've got more corners. The DRS is less effective, but it allows them to get alongside. But by the time they're alongside, they're at the end of that straight anyway. And so my question to you is, though, have you come to a decision yet on this race weekend format with the sprint? Do you feel like it's a good addition to Formula One or not? Because we've had it confirmed that we've got 6 sprint races next year instead of the standalone 3 that we've got this year and we had last year. And so do you think that it's a good addition to the sport, or do you feel like this is taking something away?
I mean, like we said earlier in this pod as well, I think I like it to a certain extent. I like the race and like how they get a little bit more points, and it's interesting to watch more racing because it's just great for spectator. But I think the position for the main race should be taken from the qualifying session, which should be the fastest lap of the weekend. That just makes sense to me because then you don't get the guys running off like we said. But yeah, I'm still not conclusive on it. Maybe we need to see it at some different tracks. I don't know which ones are agreed for. I haven't actually looked into that so much, but yeah.
Yeah, because I thought on the face of it this weekend that it was going to be an ideal track for the sprint because it's a short track and it's a short sprint race, and so that you'd think that would tie in. I don't know what it was about that made me think that could potentially work well. I just, like I said at the beginning, there's something about the sprint weekend format that I'm not sold on.
No.
There's just, I don't know. I don't know whether I don't like the fact that the qualifying is on in the middle of a work day on a Friday. I think that's stupid.
I didn't know it was on.
And I understand.
Me being an idiot, I did not know that session was on. So I was just strolling back home from Marks and Spencer's, getting my Colin the Caterpillar for the weekend, and then I get home and I'm like, shit, I've missed half of that part. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird way of doing qualifying because I'm so used to it being Saturday, and then they have FP3 the day after the qualifying session, which is just bullshit in my opinion.
Yeah, so I don't know what the rules are surrounding that. Is it a case that in that FP3 session you're in Parc Fermé because you've already qualified, so you can't change any setup?
Yeah, exactly.
On the car?
You're getting more practice for something you've already done. I don't.
Yeah, what's the point? Because the whole point of practice is the fact that you go out, you test your car, you make setup changes depending on what the results are of those tests, and then you come back, you qualify, but you're set in stone. Then you've had to make your changes. If you've got it right, you're great. You've got it right. If not, you've not. So that additional practice session doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I know it gives the driver a bit more time on track, but just don't give it to them. They've already had a sprint race.
Well, I think
now they've already had a qualifying session.
Now that you mention this, I think going back to the degradation that we were mentioning, there were so many sessions this weekend because I think we had Formula 3, Formula 2, and Formula 1 all there this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So each session was right after the next. So if you've got those cars on track constantly, the track evolution must be like so much more than what we're used to in other tracks where there's not as many sessions. So maybe that was causing, I don't know, I guess the track doesn't wear out like that, but yeah, is it hotter because of that? I don't really know. Maybe I'm going off on something that means nothing here, but I probably am actually. But yeah, it could be a factor.
Yeah, I just I like the format. I like the standard format. I think
I'm just
it
used
works.
to it.
You know what you get in. You come to a Saturday, it's qualifying. You come to a Sunday, it's a Grand Prix. And then for us relaying it, what do we come away with at the end as fans? We have the Grand Prix, and so the Grand Prix is the main event. So the sprint race then falls behind. We like we have done today. We don't focus that much time on the sprint race because it's a little bit irrelevant in a sense.
Yeah.
I know there's more points on offer for it, this year, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about it. I'm not sold on it. I've got to be honest. I'm not sold.
No, nor am I. And I think there'll be other podcasts as well and other people speaking about this. The most time you put towards the sprint race is actually arguing whether or not it should be a thing, which is pretty mental. But I bet there was fans at that arena on the track that didn't know that the sprint race was happening. I bet there's still people because it's not something that's like heavily organized and heavily planned. Obviously, people know it's happening, but the calendar doesn't show it. Obviously, the official calendar does not show that that's a sprint race until the weekend where you get there and you know it's the sprint race.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the official one didn't have it on there because I was checking, and that's why I didn't know what time it was.
Interesting. I think it's a bit. I think it needs work. I think why not do the qualifying immediately before the sprint race? Why don't you do qualifying and then an hour later go straight into the sprint race? I just don't like that format on a Friday.
It's just weird, isn't it?
I know we're biased. I mean, we're in the UK. Obviously, you've probably got people in the US thinking, "Well, this is our problem every week,"
Oh, yeah.
or even in the East, this is a difficulty
new
for
fans.
us. But
Over the last couple of weeks, new fans must be going, God, I didn't expect Formula One to be like this. With the way that fans have been acting, and this is something we should definitely speak about as well. I mean, the last couple of races, Grand Prix in Silverstone was, British people, like we discussed last week, it's very common for British people to be that way. But cheering when there's
if you've ever been to a football game in the UK,
yeah, exactly. Cheering anything when there's a crash is wrong because you don't know how well the driver's going to get off from that. Imagine if Guan Yu Zhou was Verstappen in that position, I doubt there'd be much clapping because you'd be pretty concerned for the driver, and you never know what damage or what impact a crash has had on someone. So why the hell are they clapping at anything like that?
I don't know. I'm not on board with it. I said it last week. I think the jeering of drivers, I don't understand it. But there was controversy at the beginning of this race today. I mean, I came to the broadcast fairly late today, not long before the race began, and it already kind of been wrapped up. But I don't know whether you heard any more about it.
I was watching. There's a lot of racial harassment, abuse in the stadiums. To be honest, you can kind of see it during the race, even because there's so much smoke and things. I get you're cheering on Max in the Red Bull ring, and it makes sense to have that. But the smoke is illegal in the sport. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in every sport. You can't just bring a smoke bomb into a crowd. Which
they seem to get away with it though.
There must have been like 400 of them in that crowd at some point. There was so much smoke you cannot see. There's no way people can see through that on the starting lap. I just don't understand how that's allowed and why there's so much abuse going on.
So it was. I mean, like I said, I came to this situation fairly late. Was it? I mean, was it on TV that this had been happening, or was it just a case of that there'd been murmurs around the paddock that had been going on in the stands?
More murmurs. They'll never broadcast a fight or something in the stands. I don't think that wouldn't be right. But that was what was going on. I think
that would be. I mean, as good as that would be,
yeah,
as an entertainment factor.
Well, it's like, when you got a home and away game for football fans, you separate the fans and it's secured by guards. At Formula One, it is not like that. You sit where you sit. You could be in the middle of hundreds of Verstappen fans, and you're the only Lewis Hamilton fan, and that's when you get fights.
That is a good point. Actually, maybe they should look to separate supporters at this point because of the fact that the sport is growing. Maybe we need to look at, okay, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it on Twitter, but it's just ridiculous. I mean, no fan base is immune from it. Yes, you've got Verstappen fans that are hurling abuse, but you've also got Hamilton fans in the exact same way. They are so righteous, especially on Twitter. I've seen at least it's ridiculous, and it needs to stop. There's no place for it in sport, any sport, not just Formula One, but any sport. And I think Hamilton was right coming out and saying, but all the drivers need to be vocal about this. They need to say, no, enough is enough. It's great that you're there to support your driver, and you're entitled to have a favourite driver and support whoever you want. That's absolutely fine. That's not what we're trying to say. It's a case of do it respectfully. That's it.
Yeah.
Just do it respectfully. There's no reason to be aggressive and hostile and abusive to other people. There's absolutely no reason, because at the end of the day, they're not doing anything to you. They don't have any control over any situation within Formula One. They just support who they support.
Yeah, and there's still negativity even online through social medias where people are batting at Hamilton for saying that his upset is happening and the profiling of people in the stadium. I don't think you can have any opinion on what he's just said there. He's got one of the strongest voices, well, the strongest voice in Formula One right now. If he says something like that, usually you've just got to support that. I know sometimes there's things that he says that are complete bollocks, but when it's completely true and it's about us as a fan, you kind of have to respect that. And the other drivers should be even retweeting that or anything that they can do to make that message get out to people. But yeah, it's a real shame that we get to see that this weekend and that the drivers are probably affected by something that's really out of their control.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame to see. It's not something that we want to see in Formula One. And I think it's becoming more prevalent because the fan base is expanding. We've had it in football for years and years and years because the fan base is so large. In Formula One, it's only just now beginning to have this explosive growth. I mean, we can see it. I mean, we're here doing a podcast about Formula One. We've been watching it for years, and all of a sudden we're doing a podcast about it, and there's thousands of you now listening to us, which is fantastic. It's something that needs to be addressed. Football have to address it at every game. I don't know. I just think in this day and age, why are people's mindsets so archaic? I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. Just live and let live. I don't understand it.
I mean, I give an example. This is a bit of a random one. It's nothing to do with this race particularly. But when me and Tom were at Abu Dhabi last year for that final race, obviously very lucky to be there. But I came as a Mercedes supporter. Tom supports McLaren, unfortunately. But when I'm sitting there, and that we were surrounded by Max fans, absolutely everywhere, because it was his time. Everyone supports Max. The Dutch fans come out in force. But even then, there was a guy that was sitting a row behind us that kept having a go at us because we were standing up to cheer the first laps. Everyone's standing up, but he still has a go at us. Funnily enough, Dutch, very drunk, got kicked out. So I reckon alcohol probably has a pretty strong effect on people coming into the stands. I mean, there must have been.
Bear in mind that's in Abu Dhabi, where alcohol isn't actually. It's not actually legal unless you're a tourist, and you had to drink it within a pen, and so you couldn't take it to your seats. Yeah. And so really, that's as controlled as it ever could be. Yeah, it's still
bad. So think about how bad it must be when you're surrounded by 200,000 British people or Dutch people who are on the beer since probably 7 o'clock in the morning.
But this is the thing. I mean, just as much as it may not have been Dutch people this weekend. It could have been a whole host of different nations that were involved in it. But the British were doing it at the Grand Prix last weekend. And I just think, just grow up, have a bit of respect. I mean, fair enough. You want to support whoever you want to support. That's absolutely fine. We're all entitled to it. I support McLaren. Brad supports Mercedes because he's just a follower.
Shut up. I've got a Red Bull hat on right now. I'm trying to support the whole lot. I'm a
Yeah,
journalist.
yeah, exactly. You wouldn't have been wearing that in Abu Dhabi last year.
I bought this in Abu Dhabi.
Did you
Not last year, like 4 years ago.
No, I was going to say.
I think embarrassingly, I'll have to look back and see if I can find it. But during the race when I was there, I think it was 4 years ago now, I actually had this hat on for the start of the race. I was supporting Max at that point. I thought, you know what, Max has got a good chance of winning this one final race of the season.
There you go.
It's already done. And I had bought a Mercedes hat the same day because I just wanted to have a Lewis hat because I hadn't had one before. Halfway through the race, Lewis gets past. It was straight into the bag and I put the Lewis hat on. It was on TV. And
Shocking.
Yeah, I was on the main screen swapping my hat. Obviously got a lot of laughs around
Shocking
me,
behavior.
but it's kind of like I can't really call myself a fan at that point, can I?
Yeah, that's appalling. Absolutely disgraceful. Okay, then. I think last thing for us to then do is discuss our bottom 3 losers first of all. So I'll let you start off with this, Brad.
Oh God, I think this is actually a pretty tough one. I'm going to say both of the guys who were out. I think Perez had a shocker in that race. It's nothing much he could have done, but again, loser.
I forgot to mention this. Out of the 3 guys who were out, guess who was out?
What, Latifi?
Nicholas Latifi.
The curse is back.
Curse is back.
Latifi's done for. That's going to be his next 5 races over, probably. Yeah. So those 2.
This is the beginning of the end for Latifi.
Those 2 races are my losers. And for the 3rd loser, God, I don't know. I really don't know. It could be so many different people in that race. I'm actually going to say Bottas. I don't know where he finished, but he started in the pit lane because of mechanical issues.
Bottas finished 11th.
Yeah,
today.
It's not a bad result, but I think he's having a struggle at the moment. I don't think he's fully outperforming Guan Yu Zhou.
He's in a similar situation to Gasly, isn't he? He's in a car that shows flashes of brilliance, but
Other race is
throughout
terrible.
the rest of the season is fairly mediocre. Yeah.
Look, if a Haas car's got that pace, and I think the Alphas should probably have that pace too, and they've not shown that one bit of the last few races. So, yeah, for me, I'm going to put Bottas, a bit of a random one.
Okay, I'm going to go with. First one for me is Vettel. It's just a crap weekend for Vettel again. You know, he went off in the sprint. He went off in the Grand Prix as well. If you've not seen my tweet, go and look at it. I'm not going to tell you what it looks like. Just go and see it. I think it's really funny. But terrible weekend for Vettel. He ended up dead last of those who finished. I would also say Albon, just because he was running in the points until not too long in the end of the race, and then he lost that points position. So it's been a run of a few races actually now with Albon where he's struggled for points. Which is a shame, even though he's still got the red hair, so it's not doing much for him.
Should go green.
And then I would say 3rd, Pierre Gasly. Just a pretty poor performance this weekend from him. We don't normally hear much about. We've not heard much about Pierre for a few weeks, and then we hear about him this week, but it's for the wrong reasons. And so
just 6 different
losers. He's got to be.
That's interesting. That's the first time we've had 6 different losers.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, from that then, give me your top 3 winners.
Charles for sure. That was a pretty good drive. I'm happy for him. So yeah, I'm going to put him there. I'm actually going to say both the Mercedes boys. I think after a pretty tough start to the weekend. Yeah, shut up. It's not because you didn't even say anything. I know you're going to try and say it. It's not because I'm a Mercedes supporter. I genuinely think that after a hard weekend, having 2 red flags because of them, battling with cars they should really be way faster than, they still come out with a podium in 4th place, which is better points than what the Ferrari and Red Bull probably end up with. So
yeah, to be fair, they maximised the results today. Mercedes couldn't have had a better weekend, so I think that's a fair shout, even if it is biased. But we always claim to be biased. If you read the description, we are
exactly idiotic,
biased in every single way. Yeah, idiotic, biased. I just tracked drivel for an hour. So apologies for anybody listening. I will go for, obviously, I'm going to agree with you with Leclerc. Great race. First time he's come on the top step of the podium without getting a podium in qualifying. So fantastic race for him. I think he needed that. He really needed that. He needed that to keep the championship fight alive. And I'm pleased for him. I think I was ready to see a bit of a change after Verstappen winning the sprint race. I thought, Ferrari really need to pull their socks on. I think they benefited from the fact that they had the colder weather. I think that was one of the predominant factors as to why the Ferrari was a little bit quicker than the Red Bull today.
We didn't even say Sainz.
Remains to be seen.
I forgot about that. I forgot he was even out because it was such a good race.
We had
for
Sainz
him.
and we had Perez as well. Perez, had to retire with so much bodywork damage. So there was a few today. I would say second. I'm going to go for Ocon. Fifth place. I think
shout.
we don't often mention Ocon, if ever. I think just because we're both a bit meh about the Alpine team. I don't know what it is. They're just a bit of a boring team, even though they've got one of the greatest drivers of all time in Fernando Alonso. But I think Ocon is outperforming Alonso
at the moment. Yeah,
I mean we forget to mention that he's outperforming a two-time world champion in Alonso, who is a phenomenal driver and has shown how good he is in multiple disciplines in terms of motorsport. That's no mean feat. So I think well done to Ocon. Really, really good race. I'm going to go for Mick Schumacher because he finished in 6th. What a result!
Yeah.
He's had a great weekend, and I think he deserves
so much for
really
going for him right now, and I love to see that because getting your first points in Formula One, getting more points today, and he just looks faster than his teammate. It's good news for Mick, and that's kind of what we need from Ricciardo now, isn't it? Just to outperform Lando for once.
I don't want him to outperform Lando because I want Lando to be the out and out number one driver.
Biased Lando fan.
I don't want anything to jeopardize that.
Biased Lando fan.
I am biased, but
everyone loves Lando.
Ricciardo is getting older and older, whereas Norris is becoming closer and closer to his prime. But yeah, great weekend for Mick. Let's hope that this is the beginning of an upward curve on his side of things. I think he needs that momentum now. He needs to carry that momentum through. But I think that will be track dependent. I think this track obviously suits the Haas, so remains to be seen as to where we go for the next 3 weeks. But we are halfway through the season. Can you believe?
Oh, is it halfway now? Oh, wow. That's
halfway.
Fast.
This was the halfway point. It's gone really quick.
Episode 16.
I was shocked.
It's gone 16, so quickly.
Yeah. Can you believe it? Yeah, so halfway through the season. So we do still have a championship battle on our hands. Let's just hope that Leclerc can bring it back and continue to bring it back, I should say, and fight the Red Bull. Did we have Formula 2 this weekend, Brad?
We had Formula 2, so we can do a little bit of a segment on that.
Yeah, if you want to give us your biopic, feel free to jump straight into it.
Well, to be honest with you, Tom, I don't know who won.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your insight, Brad.
That's all right, Tom.
As always, ever the professional. And on that note, follow us. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. I am at for F1's sake, Tom. You are?
I'm for F1's sake, Brad.
Fantastic. So make sure you follow us. You think? I hope so. You'll see if you're watching us. Like I said, we are on YouTube now, so we're posting videos online, so you can see our ugly faces. We will also be on TikTok, so we're posting clips on there. So please go give us a like, drop us a follow, comment on the videos on YouTube. Let us know you're listening. We've got thousands of listeners now over the world tuning in, and so thank you everybody that is listening currently. Yes. If you do like the podcast, please share it.
It's a good time to follow us. I'm telling you, we've got some hopefully exciting opportunities coming up. We've been
really exciting stuff in the works.
We've had a chat in the week that was almost beyond me and Tom. We could not believe that we had that chat. And if things go well, we might even have that person on with us to talk about something with an actual racing perspective on things. We had Alex on already. Alex is trying to get into racing, but now we're looking at getting someone that has had racing experience and he's been right at the top of the game. So let's see how that goes.
Yeah, so some of the content that we're hoping to bring you over the coming months should be next level. We're trying to up our game every week, trying to bring you more new content that you're not going to hear anywhere else. And so we are working hard behind the scenes, best believe. And so there's some really exciting things in the work. So please make sure you're following us on YouTube, TikTok. We're on all the podcast platforms. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. Drop us a comment, leave us a follow, repost our stuff. It all helps. But other than that, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time round.